Back in the 1960s, Fiat made a convertible rear-wheel drive sports car called the 124 Spider. And it's probably one of those classic Italian sports cars that we'd all dream of driving on a hot summer's day. And it was built at a time when there were loads and loads of, you know, small sports cars, convertible sports cars everywhere. Fast forward to today, and the list of small, affordable, rear-wheel drive sports cars is actually a lot smaller than it was 40 years ago. In fact, a lot of people would say that it's a list of one, and that car is the Mazda Mx-5. Thankfully though, as you might be able to tell by the badge on the steering wheel, Fiat has brought back the classic Italian roadster, and they brought back as well that name, the 124 Spider. Now firstly, I'm going to deal with the big issue, so to speak, and that is that underneath this is an ND MX-5, and that's something that a lot of people are struggling to get their heads around for some reason. Now, despite the badge, the 124 Spider is actually built in the same factory as the current MX-5. It's built on exactly the same production line, and underneath the chassis is the same, the whole interior is the same, the brakes are the same, the suspension's the same. Almost all of it is shared with the current MX-5. What's different, as you might be able to tell, is the bodywork, the badge, obviously, and the engine. So, whereas the Mazda MX-5 gets naturally aspirated engines, you get a 1.5 or a 2 litre, this only gets a 1.4 litre turbocharged engine. So what am I trying to say here? Why am I talking about the differences and the similarities? Basically, I just want to say, forget about it. Who cares? I mean, really, who actually cares that they share so much of, you know, the chassis and everything like that? Because in reality, if Fiat weren't able to do that, the likelihood is they wouldn't have made a convertible rear-wheel drive sports car. They wouldn't have made the 124 Spider at all. And would you rather have just a choice of one, the MX-5, or would you rather have two, the 124 and the MX-5? I'd rather have the choice. Anyway, now that I've got that off my chest, that's been, you know, a heavy burden on me for quite a long time now, I'll talk a bit more about how it drives. And for that, of course, being an Italian car, I have come to Italy. I'm kidding, I haven't really. I mean, actually in the New Forest. But I do feel hot enough and like I've got enough sunburn today that I am in Italy. First of all, that engine. It's a 1.4 litre turbocharged 4-cylinder petrol engine. It's got 140 brake horsepower, 177 foot-pounds of torque. 0 to 60 takes 7.5 seconds, and the top speed is 134 miles an hour. Now, some have criticised this engine, saying that, well, if it's a rear-wheel drive sports car, then you need to have a really immediate throttle response, and I kind of get that, but the fact that it's turbocharged means you get a slightly different driving experience. You get more usable performance because you don't have to rev the engine so high. And in the Mazda Mx-5, you know, you really need to get up the engine before you get any performance, whereas in this, you've got that low down torque from around 2,500 to 3,000 RPM. When you bury your foot, there's a little bit of turbo lag, and then it takes off. The red line is 6,500, and at about 5,500 is when it starts to drop off. So yes, it's a more limited power band, but I feel that because you've got that extra torque that the turbocharger gives, it just makes the performance a bit more accessible. You don't have to drive it like a yob to get down the road quickly. The gearbox is a 6-speed manual gearbox, and that's the only gearbox you can buy. There's no choice of an automatic or anything like that. And it is so nice, this gearbox. It's really nicely weighted. You know exactly what gear you're going to all the time. It's a really short shift as well, and it just feels so precise. It's a really nice gearbox. Brakes, I've got no complaints about. They stop you really well, and there's some really nice pedal feel right from the top of the pedal, and the brake pedal itself is quite heavy. It's got a nice weight to it. And as well, it just feels quite stable. Although this car is bigger than the MX-5, they weigh exactly the same. So when you brake hard, you know, it's a lightweight car. It weighs 1,050 kilos, thereabouts, depending on what trim you go for. And it just feels really stable under brakes. The steering is slightly heavier than the Mazda's, but it's still just as precise. You know, you can point this car and you know exactly where the front end's going to go. And although it's an electrical system, yeah, you know what the front tyres are doing, and you can just feel the whole car move around you. It's just nice. It's good to drive, and it's intuitive. You just tune into it very quickly. Suspension is quite firm. You might be able to tell that because we're on some quite bumpy roads at the moment. but it's still very comfortable. You know, I've done a couple of 100-mile motorway journeys in one hit, and yeah, it's firm, but it isn't uncomfortable. And the fact that it's firm gives you really good body control. Now, of course, this is rear-wheel drive. Fiat did make a convertible sports car back in the 90s called the Barchetta, but that was front-wheel drive, whereas this is rear-wheel drive, as is the MX-5. And yes, you can feel the rear wheels start to slip if you put the power down, and that's quite a nice feeling. Of course it is. But one thing that I think would help it is if it would have a limited slip differential. You can't get a limited slip differential on the Fiat. You can get it on the Abarth version, which is a little bit more expensive and a little bit more powerful, but you can't get it on the standard Fiat version. I feel like that would just help that feeling of adjustability in the car, because at the moment you can get both wheels to spin, but chances are, power is just going to go to one wheel, it's just going to spin up. So I feel like a limited step differential would help it, and you could just enjoy that rear-wheel drive feeling a little bit more. Looks-wise, this is very different to the MX-5. I remember when the MX-5 came out, and it did divide opinion a little bit, because it's very aggressively styled. This is probably acceptable to a broader group of people, because it's less aggressive, and it's wider and it's bigger, and as well some of the lines are very different to the MX-5. Like if you look at the side profile, it's a very straight line up along the shoulders here, whereas in the MX-5 it kind of goes up and down a bit more. Interior, exactly the same as the MX-5. It really is exactly the same, apart from the Fiat badge. Everything else in here is completely identical. Like the sat nav, all the buttons in here, identical. What frustrates me a little bit is the fact that it almost feels like the centre console is designed for a left-hand drive car. It feels almost opposite, because the sat nav screen is just angled slightly away from me, and so are all the buttons. It just feels like everything's designed for you, not for me on this side. Prices for the 124 Spiders start at £19,545, and they rise all the way to £23,295. Now the MX-5, on the other hand, is slightly cheaper. It's £18,795, but for that you get the 1.5 engine, which obviously isn't turbocharged, so it's slightly slower than the 124. Which do I prefer? I don't know really. I'd be quite happy if I had both cars in my garage, but I suppose that isn't a reality for 99% of people who are going to buy this car. But they are very different. They're very similar on price, but they offer different driving experiences. So I feel like drive both, see which one you like the most, and go out and get one. And forget the fact that it's based on the MX-5. Just celebrate the fact that we've got two really good sports cars to go out and drive and enjoy.